There comes a time in the evolution of the individual when he looks inward and finds that all the things he once depended upon, applause, validation, possessions, even relationships, no longer hold him captive. He does not hate them, nor does he reject them in bitterness. Rather, he simply no longer needs them. Such a man is not numb nor void of emotion. Instead, he has reached a psychological threshold where his sense of self is no longer built on external structures. And it is this man, calm, complete, and ungoverned, who quietly becomes society's most profound disruption. Civilizations have always been more than their visible structures of buildings, governments, and economies. Beneath the surface, they are carefully woven tapestries of psychological dependency, designed not only to serve the people, but to keep them compliant through the reinforcement of need. At the core of every social order lies an unspoken agreement that individuals will remain attached to their desires and fears, that they will continue to chase approval, security, success, affection, and all the other constructs that allow systems to define what is meaningful in life. The more a person believes that their wholeness comes from outside of them, the easier they are to guide, to tempt, to condition. From an early age, the narrative is embedded in the psyche that identity must be earned through performance, love must be traded for loyalty, and status must be pursued at all costs. Every layer of society is calibrated to these silent assumptions, and they operate so subtly that most people never realize they are trapped by them. Governments legislate to protect the status quo, economies profit by amplifying insecurity, and media amplifies dissatisfaction so that the hunger for fulfillment is never truly satisfied, only transferred from one object to another, one role to the next. As long as this hunger remains alive, so too does the machinery of control. But then there emerges the man who is no longer motivated by this invisible system of reward and punishment, who no longer needs to belong in the way others do, who does not bend himself to meet society's expectations nor flinch at the threat of exclusion, and in that moment the order of things begins to tremble. He does not resist for the sake of rebellion, nor does he seek attention through opposition. Rather, he has simply seen through the game, and once the illusion has been pierced, it cannot be unseen. The world may continue to offer its praises and its punishments, its prizes and its punishments, but he remains unmoved because his sense of self no longer hinges on how he is seen by others or what he possesses. This detachment is not apathy but clarity, not isolation but independence. And in the eyes of society, which thrives on manipulation and consensus, this clarity is a direct threat. Because if even one man can live fully from within himself, without dependence on validation, without fear of judgment, without craving approval, then it means others can do the same, and that possibility undermines the entire architecture of collective obedience. The man who needs nothing sends a quiet shockwave through the structure of control, not by force but by simple example, by being the living proof that freedom is not found in acquiring more, but in needing less. His absence from the game calls into question why everyone else is still playing it, and that question, unspoken yet undeniable, is more dangerous than any loud protest or violent resistance, because it invites reflection, and reflection invites awakening, and awakening invites change from within, which no external power can truly stop. This is why such a man is watched, silenced, ridiculed, or erased, not because he breaks the rules, but because he no longer participates in the very dream that society calls reality, because he is a mirror showing that liberation was never in the hands of the world to begin with, but always waiting. In the quiet place within the soul where the noise of need finally fades, the functioning of society relies not on truth but on patterns, not on wisdom but on the repetition of conditioned behavior, and this repetition demands predictability, for only when human behavior is predictable can it be shaped, marketed, governed, and commodified. From the advertisements that anticipate your next purchase to the political systems that feed on polarized emotions, everything in the external world is calibrated to expect a certain response from you, and the moment you step outside that expected response, you become a variable that cannot be accounted for, and in a world addicted to control, variables are feared. The man who needs nothing becomes this very variable, for he is no longer ruled by the programmed responses that govern the masses. He does not seek popularity, so he cannot be flattered into conformity. He does not fear rejection, so he cannot be coerced into silence, and he does not crave recognition, so he cannot be bribed into complicity. His detachment is not rooted in arrogance, but in the profound inner work that has stripped away his illusions, and having tasted a deeper freedom, he no longer dances to the rhythm of approval or bends under the weight of criticism. This makes him unpredictable in the most essential sense, for he does not react from his wounds, nor does he respond from his ego, and because he has wrestled with his own inner chaos, he is no longer governed by the outer one. This unpredictability unsettles those who rely on influence and manipulation, because they cannot find the levers by which to move him. He is not tempted by the promise of fame, because he has seen the emptiness behind applause. He is not intimidated by the threat of isolation, because he has learned to find peace in his own solitude. He is not swayed by the masses, because he does not derive truth from consensus. This places him in a strange and solitary position, not above others, but beyond the reach of conventional persuasion, and because he cannot be easily categorized, those who depend on categories find him dangerous. They cannot sell to him because he does not consume compulsively. They cannot govern him because he governs himself. They cannot provoke him because he sees through provocation. In a society designed to reward compliance and punish deviation, he becomes a kind of sacred anomaly, not because he breaks the rules, but because the rules no longer apply to him in the way they once did. He has transcended the game by no longer needing to win it. He is not a pawn, not even a player, but someone who has stepped away from the board entirely. To those still playing, his presence is both confusing and threatening, because it reveals that perhaps the game itself was never necessary, and that realization undermines the very foundations of identity for those who have built their worth upon the game's rewards. The unpredictable man, the one who walks calmly without being moved by external lures, becomes a disturbance not because he is violent, but because he is free, and freedom in a world of conformity is often mistaken for rebellion. His strength lies not in domination, but in refusal, in the quiet refusal to be owned, to be managed, to be defined, and it is this refusal that causes systems built on dependency to tremble, not with hatred toward him, but with the silent awareness that his independence exposes a lie they've taught the world to believe as truth. When a man who needs nothing walks among those still deeply entangled in their desires, attachments, and unhealed wounds, his very presence becomes unsettling, not because he speaks loudly or demands attention, but because he becomes a silent mirror that reflects the hidden truths others are trying not to see. He does not seek to correct or condemn, yet his calm independence throws into sharp relief the inner chaos of those around him. The man who has detached from the need to impress does not laugh at unfunny jokes to fit in, does not chase conversations to avoid silence, and does not play roles to be accepted. And because of this, people feel exposed in ways they cannot explain. His detachment is mistaken for coldness, but it is in fact born from deep inner clarity, and this clarity becomes threatening to those who still rely on external validation to feel real. They may not consciously understand why they feel uneasy around him, but somewhere deep in their psyche they sense that he sees through them, that he cannot be fooled by the personas they wear or the masks they've forgotten they're wearing, and this perceived exposure often triggers defensiveness or even hostility. He reminds people of their own unresolved dependencies, their fear of rejection, their hunger for recognition, and their quiet, unspoken panic at the thought of being alone. And instead of facing those truths, it becomes easier to label him as arrogant, strange, antisocial, or dangerous. For it is far more comfortable to project one's discomfort outward than to turn inward and face the source of that discomfort. The man who needs nothing does not reject others, but he also does not depend on them, and this lack of psychological need makes others feel dispensable, not because he treats them as such, but because he does not bind them to him with guilt, praise, or emotional contracts. This can be terrifying to those who only understand relationships through the lens of mutual dependence, and they may try to provoke him, to make him react, to pull him back into the game of emotional validation, but he does not respond in the expected ways, and this lack of response is perceived not as strength, but as threat. He becomes the silent judge, not because he judges, but because he refuses to participate in the lies others tell themselves. His inner freedom confronts others with the reality of their imprisonment, and instead of inspiring liberation, it often breeds resentment. For freedom is not always welcomed by those who fear the responsibility that comes with it. He may be ostracized, not because he is unkind, but because his very being challenges the norms that others have accepted without question. He may be mocked or misunderstood, not because he is wrong, but because he reflects a different kind of life, a life that no longer depends on performance, control, or approval. His solitude is misread as loneliness, his peace as passivity, his restraint as weakness, when in truth, they are all the signs of a man who has integrated his own shadow and no longer needs to project it onto others. And in a society where identity is built on projection, where people define themselves through what they reject or cling to, such integration is not admired, it is feared. Not because it is harmful, but because it strips away the illusions others rely upon for meaning, and when those illusions begin to crumble in the presence of one who no longer needs them, the panic that arises is not about him, but about what he reveals quietly, unflinchingly, without ever saying a word. Power in its truest form does not announce itself with noise, does not dress itself in gold, titles, or applause, and it does not seek control over others. For the moment power seeks to dominate, it betrays itself as insecurity masked by force. The man who needs nothing is the living embodiment of this truth, for his power arises not from what he holds in his hands, but from what he has released from within his heart. He has ceased to be ruled by the external symbols of success, and has instead cultivated an inner mastery that cannot be taken from him. He has walked through the fire of his own ego, seen the illusions of superiority, popularity, and recognition for what they are, and emerged not hardened, but emptied of the false self that once sought to matter more than others. In this emptiness, he found not despair, but liberation. Because he has faced his own weaknesses, he no longer pretends to be strong, and because he has embraced his vulnerability, he no longer fears being seen as fragile. This paradox is the foundation of his strength, and it places him beyond the reach of manipulation, because the systems that govern others no longer hold power over someone who is not playing the same game. While others are still caught in the race to climb invisible ladders, to reach a summit defined by someone else, he walks at his own pace on a path of his own making, not out of arrogance, but out of knowing that there is no finish line that will grant him wholeness. Wholeness for him is already here, already present, in each step he takes inward. The man who needs nothing is feared not because he poses a physical threat, but because he cannot be bought, cannot be recruited, cannot be led through fear or seduced through praise, and in a world that thrives on controlling behavior through incentive or intimidation, such a man becomes ungovernable. Institutions, no matter how modern they appear, are built on this need to control, to ensure predictability through systems of reward and punishment. But the man who has no investment in reward and who does not fear punishment reveals how weak those systems really are. He does not speak loudly, yet his silence speaks volumes. He does not chase power, yet his self-containment radiates authority. He does not wear rebellion on his sleeve, yet his very existence is an act of quiet revolution. What terrifies the powerful is not that this man will rise up and overthrow them, but that others might begin to follow his example, to question why they chase what does not satisfy, to doubt the need for approval, and to discover within themselves the same capacity to live free. For when even one man proves it is possible to be fulfilled without dependency, to be whole without recognition, to be powerful without controlling others, the lie upon which all manipulation rests begins to lose its grip. He is not threatening because of what he might do, but because of what he already is. His strength cannot be measured by metrics, titles, or wealth, because his strength is rooted in the inner terrain he has conquered, the fears he has transcended, and the shadows he has befriended. While others are still trying to find themselves in mirrors held up by others, he has shattered every false reflection and stands now in the quiet of his own truth, not seeking to be followed, but simply refusing to be led by anything less than what is real. And in this refusal lies the essence of true sovereignty, the kind that no empire, no institution, no system can replicate or destroy because it was not given by the world, and so the world has no power to take it away. The man who needs nothing is often misunderstood, mischaracterized, and even feared, not because he is cruel or disconnected, but because his very existence challenges the foundation upon which most people have built their identities, and that threat is not a threat of violence, but of disillusionment and awakening. And so it is easier for society to paint him as dangerous than to admit that he might be offering a kind of freedom that others are too afraid to pursue. His refusal to play the game of needing, chasing, and pleasing becomes an implicit invitation for others to question why they have played it for so long, and that invitation is not always welcome, because questioning one's life story means potentially unraveling the entire narrative that has kept them safe, even if that safety was only ever an illusion. He does not force this realization upon anyone, and yet it lingers in his presence, in the way he listens without needing to respond, in the way he walks away without bitterness, in the way he stands still while others scramble for more. To the ego, this man is a threat because he is not feeding the story that says you are only valuable if others approve, only worthy if others applaud, only successful if others are envious. He moves beyond the reach of these games, and in doing so, his life becomes a quiet contradiction to everything society has taught as sacred. But ironically, the very thing that makes him a threat is also the gift he offers, not through sermons or instructions, but through the sheer example of his being. He does not try to liberate others, yet his liberation is contagious. He does not promise peace, yet his inner stillness ripples outward. He does not seek to lead, yet others are drawn to follow, not because he demands it, but because they sense that in his rejection of need, he has found a depth they have only glimpsed in moments of stillness. He is the man who sits at the edge of society, not exiled but choosing the margins because it is there that he can see clearly, and in his clarity lies an unspoken wisdom, that most of the suffering in the world is not born of lack but of illusion, not of injustice but of identification with faulty roles. He has given up the performance, not because he despises the stage, but because he has realized he is not the actor, not the mask, not the applause, but something far more enduring, and that realization can only be reached through surrender, not through striving. And so his gift is not to change the world through force, but to invite the world to remember itself, to awaken not through ideology, but through inner silence, and to realize that everything it has been looking for outside has always been quietly waiting within. His detachment becomes a form of service, not in action, but in vibration, not in noise, but in presence. And those who truly see him understand that he is not threatening anything real, only exposing what was never real to begin with. His presence stirs the soul because the soul recognizes the scent of truth, even when the mind resists it. He walks among the chaos without becoming chaotic, touches pain without becoming bitter, and holds space for others to return to themselves without demanding they do so. And in that stillness, that unwavering calm, he becomes not the destroyer of the world but the revealer of a new one, a world not based on control, possession, and fear, but on the inner sovereignty of each awakened soul that no longer needs anything because it remembers it already is everything. It was seeking to become the man who needs nothing, cannot be bought, cannot be broken, and cannot be bent to fit the molds that keep others asleep. His rebellion is internal, his revolution is silent, and yet his presence alone shakes the foundations of the world. He is the beginning of a new myth, the seed of a consciousness that does not belong to the masses, but rises from the depth of the individual soul. To fear such a man is to fear the possibility that we, too, might one day awaken and no longer need what we were told we could never live without.